Now I've finished painting the background, and here's the picture that I plan on creating. So now that I'm done with everything here, I'm going to start painting from the things that are the farthest away first. So I'm going to start at the top of my hill because those trees are the farthest away. I also grabbed two brushes. I have a large brush for larger objects like my tree, and a small detail brush that I'm going to use for my small objects that are farther away. So I'm going to start with my detail brush, and I'm going to use a brown to make my trunks of the tree. Now, if you notice, the amount of paint I have is not very much. Since I'm just doing details now, I only need a tiny bit of paint of each color. So I'm going to dip this into the brown. If you notice, I only have paint on my bristles, not on the heel of my brush, the shiny part. So now at the top of my hill, just like my picture up here, I'm going to start adding some tree trunks. And tree trunks, I'm just going to have some straight lines. I'd like to make it a little bit more realistic, and the very bottom of my tree trunk should be a little bit thicker than the top. So I'm going to make these a whole bunch of different lengths, and I just need to make a couple of them going up. So in my picture I have 5, so I'll do that. I might even mix a brown with a lighter brown in order to get some different colored trunks as well. So they're just slightly different from each other. Okay, so in my picture I have 5. I could even go ahead and make some more if I wanted to. Now that I have these here, I can clean off my brush, and then I can change the colors. And since I want to do fall, then for my trees up here, I'm going to use some fall colors to lightly dab the paint on. Okay, so I'm going to start with some orange, and maybe this tree will sort of be an orange-ish color. So if you notice, I'm just sort of tapping the paint onto my paper. And then for each tree, I don't want them to be the same color, because if they're the same color, they're all going to blend together. So I'm going to use slightly different colors, or I might even mix some colors together. So maybe this one will be kind of yellowish orange. So I added a little bit of yellow to that. And I also maybe want to change the shape, because I don't want my picture to be boring. I want there to be lots of variety. Okay, maybe the one next to it's going to be more reddish orange, like this. Ooh, that's a nice color. Maybe it's coming down a little bit lower, and maybe the bottom is a little bit thicker. So I want to change up the shapes of them. And then maybe for my last one, I'll do one that's sort of in the middle of changing colors. So it might have a couple different colors, including a green in there, because not all trees change at the same time. And if I start losing the colors, if they start mixing together, I can go ahead and add a few more in there. Okay, now I have these ones, and then maybe for my 2 ones that I have left over, I could do a pine tree. So for that, I clean off my brush, and since pine trees are green, I would make sure I'm using some green here. I could also mix it with a color, so it's slightly different than the color of my grass, because it's going to blend together if it's the same color. So for this, I'm just going to draw a straight line up, and at the bottom, I'm just going to do a little T. That shows me how wide I want it. From the bottom corners, I'm just going to put some dots going up so that I know what the outline of my tree is going to be. Maybe this one's going to be a little bit lower. So I have my dots. And then all I have to do now is dab my brush back and forth to create the shape of my palm tree. There we go. That's looking much better. And these trees are already looking really nice and different from one another. Okay, so I've got my trees up here. My next step could be to do my road right here. So I'm going to start off, if you notice my road is really, really skinny at the top, then it comes down curved and it gets wider as it comes down to the bottom. Then I move over a little bit, and the next part of the road where it continues should be wider than where I left off. And then it keeps getting wider toward the bottom. So I'm going to have my converging lines there. They come together at the top. So I'm going to have a straight line. If you notice, because I'm holding my brush straight up and down, I'm getting smooth lines. If I were to press my brush all the way down, then I would end up with really fuzzy lines, and that's not something I want. So for example, it would be like this a little bit. I guess you can't see it too well there. This is where my road will continue. But my lines don't look as nice if I press down all the way. So I'm only putting the paint on my bristles again, and I'm barely touching my page so that I get nice smooth lines. So there's a nice outline, and then I can just fill it in like this. And then when my road continues, like you see already, I move over just a little bit, but it has to be wider than where I left off because it's closer already. If I see that I need more paint, I just go ahead and reload my brush there. And then it should keep getting wider as it comes closer. So now that I have a good outline, I can go ahead and fill that one in too. Now because this is a larger area, I may want to use my medium-sized brush so it doesn't take me quite as long. The medium-sized brush is great for covering big areas. Okay, and if you notice, my lines are super duper smooth. I'm going to be looking for that in your project also, so that we have a neat product, that we have good craftsmanship. Okay, now I'm going to show you just a couple more things before I go ahead and add the rest of the details myself. One of them is the pond that I have. So right here I have a pond, and usually with water it reflects the sky. So I'm going to be using the same color that I have in the sky for my pond. And if you notice, it's not a circle, it's an elongated oval. So when I make this, I'm going to make sure that my pond is more oval shaped like this, because if we're looking at it from the side, we're not going to see a circle. I also might want to make it a little bit more interesting because that's kind of a boring pond, so I might actually change the shape to something like that. And that's fine. If you have a plan from your planning sheet, that's just sort of your starting point, because once you start, you might realize that you can do a better job by changing a little bit, and that's perfectly okay. So let me put this up here. And then before I add details to this, I can wait for it to dry. But I don't want the edges to be quite so harsh. So what I'm going to do is use the same color as my hill here. And I'm going to make it look like there are some reeds, some grasses that stick up and sort of block part of my pond. If I see that I'm pulling the pond water out there, then I just have to reload my brush again so that it's not dragging the water into the grassy area. But this is going to make it look a little bit more realistic, like there are some grasses and reeds all the way around it. All right, so I'm going to leave this here, and I'm going to finish up adding the main details to my picture. I'm gonna hold off on the pumpkin so you can see how I make that.